Hey guys, on today's episode of the Let's Get Real podcast, we are joined by a very exciting guest, AJ Morris, who is a world champion natural bodybuilder and coach. He is the owner of Made by Morris Coaching and Be Epic Clothing. We're super excited to have him on today. Hey guys, and welcome back to Let's Get Real podcast. So today we have AJ Morris. Hey AJ.
Hey guys, thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Ready to get into some good discussion here. And always, like I said, off air, just happy to support new up and coming podcasts. You know, like I did my first podcast myself back in 2014. So I know what it's like starting these things up, and it's a little bit hard to get times together and try and find a little bit of a niche, but you know, you've got something great here. So yeah, happy to be on.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, so basically we've asked our followers to ask some questions. Ask you some questions that we'll be asking you. So we'll just go through them, and
Sure.
Yeah, they're mostly around like bodybuilding and training. There's some nutrition ones. So
yeah, exactly. And also getting into the bodybuilding and competing world as well, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problems.
First question, is there an optimal resting period between sets?
Well, totally depends what exercise we're working with. Obviously, if we're looking sort of more into the bigger compound exercises, we're going to start to see the greater rest times come in. You know, if you're working with, you know, a top set and a back off on a hack squat, it's going to be very different to something like a bicep curl or a side lateral. So the optimal resting time really is how long do you need for you to be ready to elicit maximum intensity into the next set. And that actually applies to the side lateral, the bicep curl, and the hack squat. It applies to every single exercise, because every single exercise in your program should be elicited to a high level of intensity, provided you can do that pain-free with no problems. So yeah, you've just got to play about with things. I mean, for sure, you're going to probably find that as you get stronger, you're probably going to end up taking a little bit more rest than you were when you were a little bit weaker, and you don't have to sort of kind of get into that headspace that you have to get into to really do the damage on the big top end sets that, you know, are the ones that are maybe right at the end of a run of really good strength, and you're challenging yourself more than you ever have before. You're looking at that weight and it kind of scares you. That's going to take a lot more out of you than something that, okay, you're still building your strength and you're building the baseline. So again, it's a very individualized sort of question, I guess. But I'd say for me, something like a hack squat, I'd be taking somewhat upwards of 7 minutes of rest between a top set and a back off set sometimes. Whereas on arms, it's maybe something like 30 seconds to a minute. So there's a great variation between exercises.
And do you time your rest?
No, definitely not. For me, I think if I was to time, I'd probably end up going too early, and sort of trying to stick to a set allotted period. I just sort of go when I'm ready, and also I tend to train with training partners as well. And what I find helps with having a training partner is you naturally can't rush, because you've got to wait for them to load their weight, you know, them to get ready, them to do their set, and then you can do, you know, your second set or back off or whatever you want to call it. So I actually find when it comes to the pace of the session, or you could call it the workout density, it's the amount of work that you do in a given time period, it actually helps to have a training partner, because it kind of slows you down a little bit and means you don't just view your sessions as, all right, let's get it done. It's more like, okay, let's produce the most quality possible.
Yeah, I think sometimes I feel like I'm taking like far too long, but actually I need that rest. Like,
yeah,
if I'm doing heavy sets, like
100%.
rest is really important. So
I know, and especially in terms of if the gym's busy and you have to jump in with someone else on something, I try not to, because I think quite a lot of the time, especially if you're jumping in with someone who doesn't really necessarily put their everything and they're all into their training, then I feel bad for making them wait. So I just try not to get myself in that situation.
Yeah. Again, that's a really good example, because it totally depends what environment you're in as a gym. You know, if you're surrounded by, luckily for me, you know, at the moment I train in gyms that are pretty much full of bodybuilders. So we all understand that when you're on a piece of equipment, you're probably going to be there for a while. Whereas if you're in a more of a commercialized environment amongst people that are maybe, a mixture of people just wanting to lose weight, get a bit fitter and start their journey, that's a completely different environment. And I started out in those kind of environments as well. So, people don't necessarily understand that you might spend 15, 20 minutes on a machine, and you just got to work around that. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, I've overheard someone make comments about me sitting on a machine on my phone and being like, oh, I wish she'd hurry up. I wish she'd move. Actually, I was sitting there because I needed the rest. And you have like people who just don't know, and they sit there and they're like, oh, like, can you hurry up? But actually rest is so, so, so important for your growth and the exercise in general.
And you might be tracking your weights. Like, it doesn't mean you're on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially, best way to say it, I'm not sure, but older generation, who, we didn't, back in their day kind of thing, like they didn't have social media, they didn't have phones. So, I was one of the only guys that would start taking training footage when I was training in my gym when I started training. That was not, it was partially to document my journey on Instagram, because I'd started on Instagram at that point, but it was also because I wanted to see my own training. I wanted to see how I was moving weight from A to B. I didn't want to just move it, log it and think, okay, like, cool, that's fine. I needed to feel the set, but also see the set. So I think, a lot of people are scared to film their stuff because people will say, oh, you shouldn't be on your phone or whatever. But the thing is, the people that say you shouldn't bring your phone in are probably the people that should be filming their sets because they're unaware of the way that they're actually training. So, I think you just, like, if anyone's listening and is a little bit worried to use their phone in the gym, like, as long as it's for a functional reason, or you're resting, then I don't see a problem with it, to be honest. You can still train hard with your phone on you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I say to my clients as well, I say, if you're anxious about it, you don't have to have a massive tripod in the middle of the gym. I say, get your friend to sneakily put their phone up and film you, or put it against a water bottle on the floor and just angle it up. That's better than nothing at all, because
that's the best way.
Sometimes what you think you're doing and what you feel like you're doing is actually completely different to what you're actually doing when you actually look at the footage back.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a question.
Yeah. So in terms of workout splits, we obviously know there's many, many ways that you can do it. What would be your ideal workout split for yourself? And then also for someone who's just starting to get into the gym as well, because obviously that's completely different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, sure. So for me at the moment, really my split just comes down to training as frequently as I can, especially across weaker body parts, while still being able to progress in some shape or form. So I like to ride the red line a little bit with that. I like to really challenge myself in my splits so I can really just see where that ultimate threshold is. And I've done splits where I simply just can't recover. And I've gotten 4 weeks deep into them. I'm like, this is just ludicrous. I can't possibly do what I've sort of put on paper. But for me, so my sort of bias or needs analysis, whatever you want to call it at the moment, is focusing a little bit more on my push musculature. So it's like my chest, my shoulders, and also my arms. Luckily enough, those body parts are actually the body parts that kind of can be hit relatively frequently, because when we're looking at the fatigue that they create across the course of the week, it's less so than something like legs and back, because the load involved is less. So the stress overall on the body is less from those sessions. So we can kind of train them a bit more frequently and get away with it. So I have 2 push sessions a week, one on a Tuesday and one on a Saturday. And then the rest of the split sort of falls. So it goes push, pull, legs, off, and then another push session. And then what we call, this basically leg pull. So you do a bunch of leg movements with a bit of accessory back movements at the end.
Yeah.
But we call it a density day because we just, I've got that from Jordan Peters, who's a guy that I looked up to for a long, long time. And it's essentially just the whole day itself will create, fullness and muscularity in the areas that make you look dense. So yeah, we call it that. But that's my split at the moment. That's a split that's very challenging for me to recover from. I'm frequently questioning myself going into the Sunday session because only 2 days ago I'd have done a full leg session, and then I'm going into like, deadlift and hack squat again for one set. So the balance for me is keeping the volume at an appropriate amount so I can just about get that frequency and still recover. So volume is basically now my tool to manipulate the days. So I'll either go up or down on the volume depending on how well I'm recovering. For a newbie, for someone who's just like literally getting started, honestly, I'd start them out with some sort of upper lower split. That tends to be the best way to go. Just because I think that the issue with the full body split is that people aren't getting in the gym as much as they might want to, whereas an upper lower, you can kind of get them in there at least sort of 4 times a week. And if they want to get in there for 5, what I tend to do is they'll, do an upper lower throughout the week, and then maybe the weekends they'll do a shorter session, which will more so be like an isolation session. So for example, if a female client wanted, to start and the upper lower split was right, we do upper lower throughout the week, and then maybe something like glutes and side delt over the weekend. There's a sort of accessory top up session. And for the guys, it might be, like an arms and a bit of a delt day kind of thing. So again, sort of just to top up on those muscle groups that you might want specifically a little bit larger. So yeah, that's where I would begin. And again, I'm a big fan of just getting very proficient at basic movement patterns. I think the cross transfer of getting good at being able to do a hip hinge, do a squat pattern, do a press with a barbell or a dumbbell is really important, because you won't really know how to effectively capitalize on what machines can offer you until you've used a barbell, and even dumbbells well, and proficiently. So setting the baseline with some very standardized movements is going to be a great place for beginners to start. I think it's very good, all the information that we've got on socials and online now, with what are these movements that are deemed to be more efficient or better, or great machines in gyms all across the UK now that you can have access to, which is awesome. But I don't think that beginners need to hop straight to that. Like for example, a beginner hopping straight to reverse banded incline Smith machine press because the resistance profile is perfect. Unless that individual is coming into the gym straight out of the gate with, for example, a shoulder, an elbow, or a wrist issue, if they can perform a barbell press without pain, they're going to get more bang for their buck learning how to stabilize something in an environment where it's a free moving thing, because they're going to learn more about their body. They're going to learn more about what role the feet play in creating force. They're going to learn about how to position their scapula for a press. The amount of people that, I'm not exactly sure what clients you work with, but when I started coaching, I was working with, more so beginners and intermediate lifters. The issue of trying to teach someone how to hip hinge properly was, one of the things that came up a lot, like actually teaching someone to cue their hips back into a position that allows them to get a deep stretch on the hamstrings without them immediately trying to squat the weight or lead with their knees or around their upper back. That's a difficult thing. So, but, many people are quick to, just for their leg workouts, hop on a few machines. So yeah, I think start with the basics. An upper lower split offers a great sort of, foundation to go off with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more with that.
What is your favorite advanced training system?
Do we mean like intensity methods, like rest pauses, drop sets and things like that? Or are we looking more towards, I don't know, what do we mean by advanced training technique?
Let's say for strength, have you tried different methods like the Texas method or stuff like that?
Right. Okay, sure. So I'd say from like a pure hypertrophy standpoint, those sort of programs like, 5-3-1 or, a Texas approach, something like that, probably wouldn't be something that I'd look personally to use, purely because the best way for sort of bodybuilders to gain strength again is that just sort of model of getting in the gym, performing movements as frequently as possible with the volume you can recover from. So how we undulate rep schemes like those programs do, or undulate intensity. I mean, intensity is a variable across my programming is very static. It doesn't really go up and down. It just stays high. The only time it will come down is in a planned deload phase. So my training tends to work like, okay, we progress the logbook for as long as possible. We progress it until a point where we can no longer progress anymore. Or for example, in some cases, unfortunately, we'll pick up a niggle. And at that point, we'll deload or devolume, which will be like a pull away of fatigue. We'll pull off fatigue and then we'll go again. It typically looks like 6 weeks of hard training, 1 week of deloading, and then pulling back the gas pedal, so to speak. So I don't really use too many of those methods. To speak of intensity methods, my favorite is rest pause. You could also call these cluster sets. You could also call them, like, you can use Widowmakers as another way to sort of achieve a rest pause. The reason why I like these is because I believe that with a lot of people, it teaches them what a true hard set looks like. Because when you ask someone to have 3 fail points, at some point they are going to hit a really, really hard point, whether they like it or not. When you ask someone to do straight sets, it's difficult sometimes exactly standardize where they are hitting the failure point or the hardness aspect, the intensity aspect of the set that you might want as a coach. So rest pauses are pretty solid for that. If you put them in the right point, and also if they're in a movement where we have a pretty safe environment to do them. So leg training, you might want to rest pause on like a Widowmaker on like a leg press or something, or a leg extension or a leg curl. You wouldn't be doing it on something like a RDL or a barbell back squat or a bench press where there's just so much shit that can go wrong. So yeah, just do it in a stable environment. And that's probably like my favorite like technique to, if you want to call it an advanced training technique or something. So yeah,
definitely. And I myself, and with my clients as well, I use reps in reserve to try and help them get to that point. But I found that in the past, sometimes actually knowing what your true failure really is can be a setback, because you can get to a certain point and you can go, okay, so this is where I'm at. But actually, or let's say if they're supposed to do it to an RIR of 2, they think they've done that, but actually they could go for at least another like 5-6 reps. So
for sure.
How with your clients, how do you kind of make sure that they're pushing themselves to where they need to get?
I think a lot of that is done through the video form clips that have become, luckily, over the course of, the recent years, like a very popular thing in the online coaching industry. I think I could not coach without them, if I'm honest. I think I need to see what they're doing in the gym from a visual standpoint. So straight out the gate, like the first sort of prelim phases of their coaching will be like analyzing their form, and making sure that we're sort of setting that baseline. So once we've got form as a baseline and that's all where I want it to be, then it's okay, like, how do these sets look in terms of intensity? And we'll start to sort of review that a little bit more. But I also think it's still very hard to sort of diagnose that even in a video. Rep speed is a big indicator. Like, you can quite easily see when someone's making the last rep for a reason. It's like, it's got a little bit hard, so I'll just slow down this last rep, and the rep tempo suddenly goes like from this to like this, and you're like, over 1 rep, it shouldn't really slow down that much. But so then you sort of say, I think you've got more there. And I think actually over the last sort of 12, 24 months, I've been more encouraging to clients in terms of almost like saying to them that you should be putting more weight on the bar. You should be going for another rep here. Rather than sort of in the past, I think I was maybe a little bit cautious of that. And I just sort of let people guide their own load selection and guide their own progressions. But when I get to know someone and I'm really confident that I can push them, I will tell them what to go and do. I will tell them, you've got that in the tank. Let's come back to me next check-in and show me a video of you hitting exactly what I'm telling you to do. I think that actually, in a lot of ways, is really helpful, because we know how big of a tool the mind is. And when, you get told by your coach who you trust that you can do a certain amount of weight for a certain amount of reps, you're probably going to go and give it at least your best shot and come close or hit it. So, you know, I think a lot of people do, especially when they're maybe even just getting started, building confidence with higher intensity training, they do set the limits maybe a little bit too low. And they need to sort of chase down some things that scare them a little bit more.
Yeah, I think a lot of my clients stick to comfortable weights and are scared to step out the comfort zone. And sometimes they just need that push. I think a lot of the time, if they train by themselves with like heavy lifts, like squats and stuff, they just don't want to go heavy. They think they're going to like hurt themselves or fail it or whatever.
Sure.
And I always tell them, like, use the safety bars, get someone behind you, but you can do it. You know, and sometimes it's good to like just give them that push and reassurance.
Yeah, like you said, it's a mental barrier. I think in more cases than not, it's actually it's the mental barriers rather than their actual ability to do something.
Absolutely.
This person has said, does veganism limit muscle or strength growth?
To an extent, yes. You'll have to look into the way that you supplement with most likely something like leucine across the course of your day. To the impact and being a vegan for the most part is your protein sources are limited. A lot of them aren't going to contain high enough leucine thresholds to spike muscle protein synthesis. So if I was working with a client like that, I mean, it's difficult because you can only have a degree of influence. I'd say that I'd talk to them about their reasons and I'd understand their reasons. If there were, you know, I get the whole ethical reasons behind it. You know, I totally understand that. But if they came to me and they were like, look, AJ, I want to be a world champion bodybuilder, I'm willing to do anything, I'd be like, right, that's limiting you. You know, like if you've got the ability to maybe change your mind on that and open up the door to consume a wider variety, then, you know, that would maybe improve you as an athlete. But if they were not wanting to move on that, I wouldn't like force them to. And in that case, I'd be getting them to top the day up with just some simple leucine across the course of their meals, probably dosed it anywhere between, depending on what actual protein sources they're having, sometimes 3 grams of leucine per meal, depending on what they're having across the course of their day.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Christian.
Sorry, just getting them up. We've already gone through that. Okay, so we've got someone who says, I want to do a natural competition this year. How would you go about choosing the right federation and right competition for me?
Sure. So we have some really great natural bodybuilding federations in the UK. If anything, the UK is probably one of the world's leading countries in terms of natural bodybuilding. When we take teams out to world events, we always win. It's always like the UK that comes back as the winners and the ones with the pro cards, the overall titles. We produce some of the best caliber bodybuilders in the world. So yeah, it's a great place to compete, highly competitive. The best federation, in my opinion, is the UK DFBA, and so the UK Drug Free Bodybuilding Association. It's been running for a long time, coming into just over a decade. We had our 10th anniversary last year. So it's got lots of prestige. It's linked to world affiliates, so you can get the opportunity to be fully funded to travel out to Las Vegas and compete in the Olympia, the Natural Olympia, which is one of the best natural bodybuilding shows in the world. So yes, it's a brilliant federation. We also have, you know, such diversity across classes. You have, you know, men's physique, women's bikini, women's figure, women's physique, women's bodybuilding. And then you have all the bodybuilding classes, and we've just introduced a classic bodybuilding class as well into natural bodybuilding, which is pretty new. Again, interesting class because there's a lot of heat about whether it's needed or not, but I think it will be popular. So that's a great place to compete. The UK FBA has qualifiers all across the UK and Scotland across the course of the year. And basically what happens is you register for a qualifier, you do a qualifier. If you are of a good enough standard, you'll get an invite to compete at the British finals. Then at the British finals, you can obviously compete to win a British championship, which if you do and you win there, you're you're very good because the competition level is high. And then you can get the opportunity to compete in the Natural Olympia, which tends to be in November time. So yeah, shows sort of start around about June and run all the way till August, October in the UK. And then, like I said, the Worlds is in November. You've also got other options within the BNBF, which is the British Natural Bodybuilding Federation. They have slightly less classes, still the same approach, qualifiers across the course of the year, British finals and a world event. Again, a great federation. I've competed with them myself. Then obviously we've got the WMBF UK, which is the WMBF's UK affiliate. And they have, they had one show last year. They just had their first show last year. And then they're having 2 shows this year across the course of the year. So a slightly different approach. They have less shows, just sort of a novice show and a British final. Which you can, I believe you can just enter the British final without doing a qualifier. And then again, opportunities with that federation to go out to, believe it's Los Angeles later in the year for the Worlds. And I think what a lot of people actually don't realize with natural bodybuilding is that there is so much wicked opportunities, like amazing opportunities. I've been out, ever since I went out for my first ever world trip. In 2017, I won the juniors with the UK FBA. And I went out there at 21 years old to Boston. It was my first time in the States. I got fully funded. Everything was paid for. And yeah, I was like a kid in a candy shop, and it really like sparked my motivation to be a better coach, to be a better bodybuilder, and to basically chase this like natural bodybuilding passion that I had. So they've, I'll never let that one down. The guys at the UK FBA are like family to me now. Ever since then, I went out to every world event, even as a spectator, just because I love it's like traveling with a team. You have a team of individuals that are all super supportive and all chasing a similar goal. And you don't even get that if you get a few events that you can travel around, but you're never traveling really with a team when you're chasing like something like an IFBB Pro card. Like everyone that from the UK is chasing natural, IFBB Pro card. Like you'll go out to these shows on your own, maybe with your coach or with a couple of friends, something like that. But there's not at the moment, at least there isn't sort of an event where you qualify and you go out all on the same plane and you sort of create like a trip together. So there's truly awesome opportunities within natural bodybuilding. And I hope that over the course of the next few years, I can do my bit to continue to sort of elevate it, because I think the more people that are aware of the opportunities, the standard of competition as well, the better it will get. And hopefully also it will prevent people from thinking that the only way to really, really pursue bodybuilding is to go assisted, which isn't the case. And for a lot of people, actually going assisted is an extreme long-term health risk because of pre-existing issues that they may not even realize before they chase that route. So I'm just a big fan of the sport itself and what it can do and what you can experience with it, and you can obviously make a great living out of it if you choose the right direction as well. So that's the way to get involved. Long story short.
Yeah, amazing. And I think as well with unfortunately, I'd say that at times competing has a really bad rap and it's got a really bad name for itself. But actually, it's just like any other competitive sport. It has so much dedication, love, support behind it as well. Do you want to kind of like just talk through kind of the pros and cons as well for anyone listening who's considering getting into it as well, please?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, like I said just then with the assisted side, it can cause long-term issues with some individuals, but so can natural bodybuilding. Natural bodybuilding is just as risky and just as dangerous at points as well, because we're taking individuals to a point at which the body does not want to go. We're taking it way, way, way away from what's called homeostasis, which is your body's comfortable spot. And every single human body will have a very individualized homeostasis or safe place where it likes to be. You know, everyone has a weight where they just feel their best and it's comfy. And in natural bodybuilding, just like assisted bodybuilding, we go above that weight in the off season and we push in food and we stress out the GI tract and we stress our bodies out with heavy, intense training all the way up to body weight where you may be 20, 25 pounds above where your body wants to be. And then you turn direction and you come all the way down back to homeostasis on the way. And then you go probably 20 pounds, maybe even more, 25 pounds below homeostasis into the lean composition that's expected for the stage. So each of those extremes has its pros and cons, has its risks. And, you know, you've got to take them all into account when it comes to chasing down that goal. So I think the biggest prerequisite in terms of getting involved in competition is that your body is in a healthy spot, your mind's in a healthy spot, and you've built, hopefully, years of passion and love and dedication for just getting in the gym, getting after it, having a blast, and enjoying having some consistency with your nutrition approach, whether that be tracking, whether that be a meal plan, whether that be loosely tracking and just having, you know, some degree of an awareness of calories. So you're in a spot where, you know, your body and, like I said, mind is ready for that process to take place. And I think also from like a physiological perspective, you've got to be aware that you can't do this too frequently. You can't keep coming down really every year, to be honest. You've got to have kind of gaps between competitions, and you've equally got to be very resilient from a mental standpoint to be able to let go of one look and accept another look pretty aggressively. You know, like 12 weeks ago, I had lines all over my ass and detail on my hamstrings, and that's a very temporary look. I love that look for the purpose of getting on stage, but I can quickly let go of it and be attached to beating my numbers on the hack squat and gaining body fat in order to feel good again, you know. But initially, when I first dieted down and got into stage condition, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't very attached to just staying like that look, because it's a look that some people can't get to, and you feel like a sense of ownership over that look, like I've got this, no one else can have it thing. So letting it go is difficult. And equally, if I'm always super cautious with anyone that has gone through any sort of past eating disorder or issue, because it can throw up some problems along the way, in the sense that the restrictive environment of contest prep can give that element of control back to someone that was feeding off the control of an eating disorder in the past. So it can give them that restrictive and low calorie control, and then they'll struggle to flick the switch when it comes to getting out of that and letting go of that control and eating enough calories to go up. However, I must say that I've seen more cases than not about people that have had eating disorders, and bodybuilding has basically helped them fix their eating disorder in a sense that it's given them a goal, it's given them direction, and it's given them acceptance of gaining weight because they're obsessed with building muscle. You know, like my partner Loz has experienced eating disorders in the past, and she's very like in agreement with the fact that it's pretty much like fixed hers, and she's now got a passion for building muscle and, you know, becoming like a women's bodybuilder in the future, which, you know, take her back 2-3 years, that just wouldn't have been her mindset whatsoever. So yeah, you've got to be in the right place 100%. But you know, equally, it's a sport that's just super rewarding if you treat it in the right way.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
This person said, what's the biggest mistake for athletes during off season?
There's many mistakes you can make for sure. I've made most of them. So, I mean, I think you can certainly make the mistake of thinking that, you know, this whole eat big to get big is really just a means to every end, in the sense that you eat more, you get bigger, like all the time. So you just keep eating and eating and eating. And if you're, you know, like me, a bit of a chubby kid when I was younger, I could eat the world. So if you tell me I can eat everything, I'll just eat everything and I'll get very soft very quick. I'm confident that that's not a huge issue when you're perhaps in your teenage years and maybe even early 20s. Like, I just generally think that if you're eating a shit ton of food, but you're training really, really hard and you get a bit soft, I don't think you should be really that worried about that, in all honesty. Like, if you're seriously soft, you'll know about it. And you probably need to do some form of tidying up to fix that before you move forwards. But I think if you're training really hard and you're putting away a lot of calories, you're going to be putting away a lot of muscle tissue as well in that sort of foundation phase of growing, because your rapid progression in the gym is going to elicit a massive, massive stimulus for gaining new tissue, and you can afford to gain at that quicker pace. I think the issue with athletes that have really big goals, maybe they're even professional athletes already, and I've worked with professional athletes in natural bodybuilding that will happily admit that their off seasons are nowhere near as effective or consistent as their preps, because they seem to flick a switch when they prep. It's prep, so I'll start taking everything seriously. I'll sleep better. I'll time my meals perfectly. I'll drink my fluid. I'll manage my stress better. I want to do everything because I'm prepping, and we reached this time of the year actually where, a lot of my clients will start prep and they'll be like, oh, but I want to get this sorted by prep. I want this perfect routine by prep. I'm like, why by prep? Like, if you're an athlete that wants to win shows and wants to be a professional, or even is a professional, wants to win pro titles, you've got to treat your off seasons as close to a prep as you possibly can, realistically, within the given constraints of your life. Not everyone can be an athlete all the time. Of course, it's not expected, but we'll at least expect some degree of pretty harsh consistency. Like, when I'm at home, which is pretty much like 95% of the year, I will be in a very robotic routine, very robotic. I'll get up at the same time. I'll go to bed at the same time. I'll eat my meals at the same time. And that's the same whether I'm 12 months deep in the off season or 1 week out from a show. It's the exact same. And I've had off seasons where I haven't done that, and I've made considerably less progress than off seasons that have been a quarter of the length, but consistent. Like, there's no reason why everyone says that consistency is key. It's because it is key. It's the bottom line. It's fundamental for progress. So I think, the cross transfer of the prep consistency into the off season is probably the biggest missing point in a lot of people's off season trajectory.
Going off on the consistency is key. How do you kind of handle times where, there's like obstacles that come in the way, you're ill, or, you can't train or stuff like that? Because obviously, if you're in a set routine, so, every single day, and then something throws you off, it can be quite.
Yeah. I must admit, like, if I'm ill, I get very frustrated because I can't follow my normal routine. So I'm still that person that will whine like a 12-year-old when I'm not well. I just hate it, because I love working. I love being at my desk, doing my check-ins. And if I'm coughing or sneezing, I just can't handle it. So I try and avoid getting ill as much as possible. So that's illness. And obviously I'll just take time off training if I'm sick, because I'm also the kind of person that I don't want to go to the gym unless I'm going to get an effective session in. I can't handle going in and not being productive. So if I'm not at the readiness level that I expect of myself, I'm not going in. And I've made that mistake in the past of, I feel all right, it's just a head cold, I'll go in and I'll just make myself worse. So I've learned that lesson multiple times. I'm sure we all have. And then in terms of like actual time away from training and, structuring more, I guess, like normal life stuff, I'm big on that. I'm very supportive of, at the right time, putting in stages where you actively take time away from training and you actively take time away from your routine. So like last year, I basically ended my contest season in 2020 in October time, early November, but then went into a very, 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 very consistent off-season phase. And then I dieted all, like, pretty much from April, the end of that off season, all the way until mid-November. And that was literally, apart from a short stint, which was affected by lockdowns, that was literally the same. I did the same thing every day for that entire period. Very, very, very minimal changes or disruptions in routine. I think we went to like Silverstone to watch the F1. That was the only day where we went and did something different. And obviously then we still took all our normal meals and just shifted training. But that was it. And then, so at the end of that, I must admit, I was a little burnt out. It's probably the way of saying it is. By the last show of the season, I was like, you know what, like I need some time away from that. Like, okay, get up and go routine. Because it was becoming a bit, probably toxic is the best word for it. It's like, it's beating me up more than I'm enjoying it anymore. And that can take away from my work quality as well, because my work is a massive part of my routine. So we went to New York, and I took like 5 days off completely from everything. Didn't do check-ins. I didn't do training. I didn't look at my steps. I didn't look at my food. And that was very refreshing. Difficult, very difficult, but very refreshing. So I'm supportive of those things when it's the right time to do them. I don't do those things very frequently. It'll be like maybe a once a year max kind of thing. But it's good. It's good to do them. And I came back and I felt like I even had like 3 or 4 massive business ideas whilst I was away, because as soon as I flick my head away from the day-to-day, like robotic running around the rat cage kind of mentality, I start to get my creative brain working again. So I start to think, I want to do that differently, or I want to chase that endeavor. And I wouldn't have actually accessed that portion of my brain, in my opinion, if I hadn't of actually taken some time away from that structured day-to-day routine that I do have.
What is your thoughts on 1 rep maxes?
I don't do them very often at all. I can't remember the last time I pulled a 1 rep max, unless it was like by an accident or something. But I'm not a fan. I think so. When we're looking at fatigue, again, the fatigue to stimulus. So stimulus is like what we get out of it from a hypertrophy standpoint, and the fatigue is obviously the cost. The fatigue to stimulus ratio on a 1 rep max is pretty skewed when we're looking to build muscle. We're really going to get a lot of fatigue, and we're not going to get much stimulus. Again, big fan of what Jordan Peters does. And I'm a big believer in one of the things that he's always said, which is touch new weights. So I believe that there is benefit in sometimes doing very low rep sets to touch a new weight, to feel it, to get confident with it. So I might touch something for like a triple, like a 3 rep set, which realistically, when you look at it on paper from a hypertrophy perspective, it's probably not a great stimulus. I'm carrying a lot of fatigue. I'm not getting great bang for my buck, but I've touched that weight. What happens next is my back offset flies because it feels like nothing in my hands.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of like the cost benefit I get from those things. Again, there's certain individuals that can do 1 rep maxes and recover from them fairly decently. I know for a fact that it would have a massive impact on the rest of my week. So I just choosing your battles when it comes to lower rep ranges is pretty much the key there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with it all comes down to what your goal is and what you're working towards. If you're obviously working towards strength, it makes sense to do the lower rep ranges. But whereas with bodybuilding and competing, you really do want to try and grow those muscles as much as possible. And being wise with your selection of programming, I guess that is key.
Yeah.
Thoughts on caffeine whilst training or as an athlete?
As an athlete. So again, just something you need to be smart with. It's a stimulant. It's something that basically creates a stress on the body. So the stress on the body means that we've got to be smart with when we use it as a tool. You know, if we use it too frequently, what we're going to do is pull our bodies into, basically, to put it in the most simplest of forms, it's like our fight or flight state. So we'll go into that state when we start to raise adrenaline and cortisol. We have 2 states, one being of the autonomic nervous system, which is basically like our body's like control of how we feel and what hormones are released as a result. There's sympathetic, which is that fight or flight, and parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So outside of training, we want to be in that parasympathetic or rest and digest place where our resting heart rate is low, stress hormones are low. This is going to help us with recovery. This is going to help us with sleep. This is going to help us with, focus for work. This is going to help us maintain an environment where we can lose body fat relatively well, because a stressed body is not going to lose body fat very well. We're going to drive up stress hormones. So yeah, use it smart. So there's also phases where you can use caffeine as a smart tool to suppress appetite, to increase focus when you're dieting down. So typically for me, like maximum caffeine intake will be like 800 milligrams a day at the very, very back end of prep. And I'll be like hanging out my ass kind of caffeine intake. So that will be like 1 coffee in the morning, 1 to stagger myself between my 2 sort of work shifts in the early morning. It's like a second caffeine serving, and then 1 pre-workout. And then that'll be me for the day. Another thing is just making sure you cap it around about 3 p.m. latest, so you're not impacting sleep. Caffeine has a half-life. Caffeine's half-life is depending on your dosage. It's also dependent on your body weight as well. So it's irrelevant as to how long it is. Just try and cut it about 2-3 p.m. And then just like also be careful of other stimulants as well that could be creeping in. So like when you're using stim pre's don't just have caffeine in them. They have loads of other stimulants which are going to carry that same effect, which are going to again create that environment in which you can potentially be a little bit maybe anxious or a higher resting heart rate going into bed, which is something that probably, again, everyone has experienced once when you take a bit too much pre and you literally just can't sleep. That's just not a great place to be from a recovery standpoint. So yeah, just use it as a smart tool.
Yeah, amazing. So I have this question here. I feel like this is actually a really good one to finish off on. Sure. This guy has asked, could you please tell us a highlight of your career?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or a few if you want.
Yeah. A few. I think probably like one of my best bodybuilding highlights as a competitor was winning my first British title when I was a junior, because I actually said it to a client the other day. It was the moment where I realized that, okay, I can actually be relatively good at this. It was a moment where I thought, okay, this is something where I can chase this passion. And, not like I needed that confirmation, because I knew how passionate I was about it. If I'd placed 5th, I'd still just have this passion. You can't ignore something like that. But it was great to see that passion and hard work paying off in that kind of result. And then most recently, I think, again, winning another British title, but this time as a men's open athlete in a stacked open class. And to do that, at 25 again is something that I'm really, really proud of. And I think those accomplishments for me will probably like hang as the biggest ones in my bodybuilding career to date. So yeah, but hopefully more to come.
Definitely more to come. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
If anyone listening wants to find out more about you, or where should they go to find out more about you?
Sure. So one of the best places to stay up to date with me is AJ_Morris_ on Instagram. And then I also have a YouTube, which is just AJ Morris. You can just find that. It's gaining some really good traction as of late. So I'm putting some more effort into producing really consistent content there, and should have like my own podcast back soon, which will be on the YouTube channel as well. And then I have Be Epic, which is my clothing brand, which is a slow grower in the sense that we're doing a lot more with it this year than we have done ever. So yeah, it's getting to the point where I'm getting some really clear vision as to where I want to take that brand. So that's going to be growing over the next year. And then yeah, some cool other business bits in the pipeline, but you'll be more aware of those if you follow me on Instagram. So but yeah, like I said, thanks very much for having me on. Some great questions, and hopefully anyone that listened enjoyed it.
Amazing. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.